Hello, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to our first Stretch It Live of 2026. I'm Alicia. If it's your first time here, one of the master trainers on the app. My apologies for being late. I am late. Had to run from an errand and get some lunch. I scarfed it down and here we are. Here we are, scarfed down lunch. And today we are covering the do's and don'ts for training splits. So this is a great opportunity for you to drop any questions. Super. And we also have a few announcements. Our stretching competition begins this Monday, January 5th, and it runs through February 3rd. So we got some cool prizes lined up for that competition. Definitely check it out if you can on the app. Also, our flexibility boot camp begins on Monday, so definitely check out those details. And today, again, we're doing do's and don'ts for splits. Now, I'm sure you've already encountered a lot of do, don't lists here on the internet as it pertains to splits, but I wanted to give you a few, not just physical do-don'ts, but also conceptual ones, right? So we'll definitely go over my favorite stretches for splits training and don'ts. Well, let me start with the do's, okay? I would figure out where your split sits now. So make an evaluation for yourself and I'll show you how that looks like. Number two, do train consistently. You don't get splits in a day. You're not going to get splits in 30 days, although I'm sure there are people who could. I wouldn't know how well that split will look, how good the technique is. There are a lot of factors to cover, but train consistently means that you work on your splits a few times a week, weeks on weeks, months on months, and then through the years. That's going to yield the best results, consistency. Number three, do choose the right exercises and perform them in a way that actually contributes to your split technique. Okay? And I think that's it. Those are the top do's. Okay? Now the don'ts. Number one, don't expect to get splits since yesterday. They take time. Don't force it. Number two, don't try to force your body into a position that is not quite ready for yet. Take the time to learn about your body, what it can handle, what it can take on, and therefore you will have a much better idea on how you can achieve split while keeping your body intact. And number third, don't just think about the final position, but also think about the range of motion that you have acquired while working towards your flat split. Let's see. I have been practicing on split for months, but still pelvic not stretching during split. So I can't tell you what to work on because I would have to see you physically and just know a little more about how you're training. So let's get into the first part of the do. Number one do is to see where your split is at the moment. So I would have blocks because blocks are quite helpful in stacking your pelvis stacking your torso right over your pelvis so you can see where you are, right? I like to hold the blocks right by the pelvis, keeping back hip fairly neutral. You could turn out front hip a little bit. And let's say this is where you're starting at. So we can see from that assessment that we got to work on our hip flexors and we got to work on our hamstrings, obviously. So when it comes to the pelvis, it's important that when training for front splits, and we went over this last week, we did, I think, either the week before, probably 2 weeks ago, that it's important that you acquaint yourself with properly extending the hip. You want to be able to get as much extension from this back hip as possible. And if stretching alone isn't helping, then applying isometrics and putting some tension into the actual range of motion will work better for you, because one of the best ways to communicate to your tissues is to use force. So if just stretching alone isn't making a difference, then you actually have to apply some tension to that joint so it could actually respond in a way that you want it to. What that means, especially, or for this position specifically, you don't just want to stretch. You want to actually pretend that you're sliding your knee forward, tense up the entire front portion of your thigh. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. This is the pails and rails drill described in a very shorthand fashion. And the second part, once you ramp up to your max effort, let's say you could ramp up 60%, you could work towards a higher percentage as you become more advanced. Then you focus on the shortened part. You squeeze, 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 and then you sink deeper into the stretch. That might actually help. It's a more advanced technique to get more range of motion, especially if you're having trouble with your hip. Is this going? Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm missing stuff. Here we go. All right, I'm back on track. So that's important to know. Sometimes, yes, it might not just be holding stretches for a long time, but then I also have to ask, how long are you holding the stretches? What type of technique is involved? How consistently are you stretching? If you're saying for months, are you doing it a few days out of the week, or you're doing it a few weeks out of the years or out of a few months, right? So once I know all those details, I could better assess what's the next step to take. I ask a lot of questions. But one of the ways that you can jumpstart your training, or even put a little fire under it if you've been stretching for a long time, is to apply the pails and rails technique as like the baseline, a technique to start with. Lunges, hamstrings. I like the half split hamstring stretch. And you could also apply pails by trying as if you're driving your leg through the floor. It's tougher to do pails and rails in the standing position, but I like this as a passive stretch choice. It's nice to mix them in. Where you're just hanging over the leg, you could use blocks to support the weight of your torso. My go-to stretch for hip flexors and quadriceps, for sure, heel to butt. This is my ultimate go-to. I always do that stretch before splits because it truly targets the front of the thigh in an S-tier way that just helps the pelvis get lower. So you are probably going to hold them up to 2 minutes. So 20-30 seconds is a good start. But if you're stretching for a while, you're going to have to hold it longer. So that means you're going to have to hold this up to 2 minutes. And that's going to give a louder signal, will be a louder signal for your hip flexors. And again, you don't just want to sink into it. You want to hold a steady position where back thigh doesn't turn out, but it stays pointing forward. You keep the torso upright and you just hang out here. Even if you add a little bit of a back bend and you eventually add heel to butt and then you return to your lunge, it's definitely going to make a huge difference. So that already, just hold your stretches for longer. For sure. And that's what I'll start adding also when we are creating new content for the app. Just longer holds, some isometrics to advance the progress. What was the third? Oh yes, consistency. So consistency is important, but you also have to update your progression. Because if you see yourself improving over a course of several weeks and months, you want to follow through with those improvements, making the stretch a little more challenging, holding the stretch longer, maybe applying a little bit of force to really crank up the range of motion, but also the intelligence for your tissues. So you're not just gaining flexibility, but they are becoming smarter in that range of motion where they know what to do in this newfound movement, plane landscape that they have. And that's important because with anything, even with lifting, I can consistently lift 5-pound dumbbells for a year. I'm lifting the dumbbells consistently, but I'm not improving significantly because I'm not increasing the load. So you can still perform the same stretch and hold it for the same amount of time for the course of several months. But if nothing changes, even though you've been stretching consistently, you're not going to see vast levels of improvement. So that's also something else to consider. Make sure you're being consistent, but also progress with that consistency. And it doesn't have to be crazy jumps of levels from week to week or month to month. You might have a little bit of a plateau sometimes, but gradually improving, whether changing the exercise, the stretch, holding it for longer, improving the technique, making it harder. As an example, if you've been doing the heel to butt version where you reach back and you have consistently been doing this exercise, but you arrive at a point that is fairly easy. So that means you have to change it where it's a little tougher, where it demands more extension from you. If you keep doing the first stretch and it's easy, but you keep doing it, it's easy, nothing's going to happen up to a certain point. So that's why you have to keep track of your progress, keep stretching, but also follow through with those changes. I'm just doing my other side so I could be even. Same thing with middle splits. Same thing with middle splits. My go-to exercise for middles, for sure, has to be frog. Frog, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important stretches you can do because it allows you to target your inner thighs while keeping your knees bent. Because this is a tough stretch to hold when you don't have a lot of upper body strength, but you also don't have great control over that position. But if you're on the knees and you can cushion them well, you can actually target the inner thighs and work on the middle split position, or work on what your pelvis is virtually doing while in a middle split. And the equivalent to that, but for straddle, because I know that if you're having issues with the straddle pancake variation, one thing you can do is actually work, in a low squat position, 1 or 2 blocks, sit on the stack, and in your low squat position, you actually now have an opportunity to press the legs out and wide as they would be if extended out in front of you. But now you could probably maneuver your torso a little bit better. Also good mornings, but seated good mornings where you can lower down and come up. But because you're seated, you have a little bit more range to work through and can also target your inner thighs more because you're actually able to move your pelvis and tilt it in a way that it can't tilt as much if you're seated with legs straight out in front of you. So I love the low squat variation because you could do one thigh at a time. You could add some reaches here. And that's also great for front splits because when you think about it, your front glute when leg is straight out in front of you, there is still a degree of stretch that happens in your butt, right? So it's probably a good idea to do the inner thigh stretch as well, even for your front splits. I would argue that your inner thighs are stretching in a front split. You might not feel it as much as you do in a straddle, but it's still stretching. It is still stretching. So that's what I would recommend. Even if you feel overwhelmed, because I know a lot of info is presented in categories, right? You got to do this for the middle split and you got to do this for the front split. Yes, there are certain stretches that hold a higher priority in terms of what they contribute to each position. But at the end of the day, they all contribute. And if I were to pick out maybe like the big three, if you just want to shut your brain off and choose the ones that you know will greatly improve both positions, definitely a hip flexor variation of some sort, inner thigh variation of some sort, and hamstrings. There, you're done. What's an example of that? Hitting the hip flexors, right? So depending on what level you're at, I would choose the stretch that's going to give you more bang for your buck. So sure, you could just do the regular low lunge. If you're getting used to the position and you still want to work on it, fine. If you've been doing that for weeks though, I would crank it up to now heel to butt or heel to butt same side, right? So try to get that thigh low and try to get heel as close as you can to your butt. Number two, I said hamstrings. So you can sit straight back or you can come up and do the folded over version. And then you come around here and do your frog. And you hold this for 2 minutes. You could shift back and forth. You could practice the arch and curl, whatever you like. And now, once you've done your little circuit, you can try front split. See how it feels. Mine feels better already. My hamstrings still need a little bit. Typically, I'll have to spend more time on my hip flexors and hams to get down, like in like a 10 to 15 warm-up type of time frame. And then you can also see where you're at with the straddle, reaching forward. If you want to slide down with the legs wide, that's not a beginner entry. It's not great because, one, if you don't exercise or you're not strong, then holding your body up while your legs are like this is more advanced than what it looks like. I say that because I used to take for granted what my body can do. I have to remember that on average, I am in the single digit percentile for women my age and what physical achievements I can do. So I cannot say that anyone can do this because they cannot. And that means, yeah, you have to have some sort of upper body strength to hold your torso. You have control or need control over your hips so you don't just collapse into this position. Right? So I would make sure that there's something underneath your hip, like make a pillow tower, stack some pillows so that you have something to land on, maybe lean on a couch, something that doesn't roll so you have more support for your upper body. And eventually you'll be able to hold yourself in a straddle position like I just showed, right? That I don't want you trying that if you haven't stretched or you haven't done push-ups or you don't have any upper body strength if it's quite weak, which you can improve. But, and also with the wrists, right? If you don't have great wrist mobility, then putting weight in that position isn't great either. My apologies, I gotta slide in closer. So the best way to start is to see where your split is and then just take it from there and tackle each body part at a time. choose a stretch for your hamstrings, choose a stretch for your lunges, and then choose a stretch for your hips in terms of something like an external rotation type of a gig or abduction, right? I say that because everything comes from doing. What does that mean, Alicia? The more you do it, the better you get acquainted with what's next. You're just in a better position to plan and to make choices. Because when you go into the hypotheticals, how would you know? Because you're not in it. Your body hasn't done it yet. So I wouldn't worry about getting it right the first time. I wouldn't worry about starting with the best program, because you just have to start and realize what works and what doesn't work. I want to make a crazy analogy, but I think it's relevant. Cooking. Okay. You're looking at a person who used to buy her breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was takeout all day, every day. I didn't go near the stove. Don't give me a pan. Don't give me any of that. I hated it because it just seemed that all these recipes and cooking techniques and everything that you might need, I didn't want to deal with it, right? It was just chaotic. Until one day I said, this is enough. You're spending too much money on takeout. You really should learn how to cook for yourself. Okay. It was a little crazy in the beginning. It was shaky, not great, but you know what? I know what to do now because I started. I didn't worry about getting it right the first time. I remembered my mistakes and didn't do them over again. But you know why I learned that stuff is because I did it. It's because I took chances and I said it was okay that it took me a few months to get the hang of cooking. And I'm not some great chef or whatever, but I now cook well enough that I could cook for my parents. I cook for my boyfriend. I cook for myself. I could go to any grocery store and figure out what my meals are because I've been in the kitchen. Stretching, lifting, or any type of discipline is like that. When you want to take on something new, you just have to start. You have to start at the base level. And then once you get acquainted with the vocabulary, with the movements, you then now are in a better position to create a formula for yourself that works. But you don't know that information until you actually get in the grit. You got to get in the grit. And I'm not saying you're going to have some, enlightening moment like, oh, this is so great. No, it's probably going to be crappy in the beginning, or maybe not. But if it's crappy in the beginning, don't give up. Okay? And I guess that is the bonus don't. Don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged if you don't see progress quickly, if it feels like crap in the beginning, because that's how everything is. If you're not seeing progress, you then have to make an evaluation, but this is why tracking is important. You can't track what's not being measured. You can't make a decision without the data. You don't know where to go because you don't know where you've been. If you have the data to say, I stretched this number of days, I held these stretches for this amount of time, and over the course of several weeks, you see the time, you see the stretches, and nothing is happening, that's where you say, okay, I got to hold this stretch for longer. Okay, maybe you got to change the variation of that stretch, and maybe I have to change the time I'm stretching because a lot of things are going on, so I can't really focus, or whatever it is. This is why you have to track what you're doing so you can make the best decision for your program and for yourself. So that is a bonus do. Do track. That will be my top do's and don'ts for splits, for trading splits specifically. And if you want to check out what the do's and don'ts are, I had started off with those at the beginning of this live, which you'll be able to see from the beginning on our feed as a reel. So don't you worry if you just join, you're like, oh, I missed the do's and the don'ts. They're here. I go over them in the beginning. But I wanted to reserve some time for any questions specifically pertaining to the topic. What is this curl doing? My gosh. Rogue hair. I know for myself, I'm excited for this year because I want to get a little more consistent with my flexibility training, because even though my body overall has become tighter from the lifting, there is a nice, comfortable sense of security because I'm stronger. My tissues are reinforced. So I like to stretch now because I am in a totally different body than I was 5 years ago. So it's nice to now make these shifts and feel these different sensations in a different body. But again, I changed my perspective on it because I could be a negative Nancy and say, I can't do my splits like I used to. I'm like, but you still can. You just got to work on them. You have to work differently. So I'm looking forward to it. Yay. I find that 15-minute sessions are great. They help you maintain what you've already achieved, and they just help you stay in rhythm. They just help you stay in that flow so that you're adding something to the bank. Sure, it might not be a $20 bill, but it's a $1 bill. Do you want to put more 20s in the bank? Sure. It depends on the week. It depends on the month, but we could still put money in the bank. So those are what those 15-minute sessions are. And once you kind of grab your own routine, because I have my personal routine that I use for the 10 to 15-minute sessions, I do it after I return from my walk. I'm a little warmed up. I've been outside, and it's a great opportunity for my body to just kind of melt into the stretches. And that is like my cue for the stretch of the day. And I also suggest that you kind of pinpoint a part of your day as your stretch time. And it doesn't have to be a long time. Oh, I love this question. How long until you see results getting abs? How long do you have? There's no such answer to that question. There's no such answer to that question from a general angle, okay? Because genetics play a role. How you hold your fat on the body plays a role. Your nutrition, your exercise. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. There is no answer for that. There are answers, but not a one and done. Well, this is what I have to do starting tomorrow. I will say, if there is one thing to contribute, is definitely to clean up your eating. But it really all depends, because some people just sneeze and they have abs and others don't, but they're really strong and their performance is crazy. But that's an entirely different topic. An entirely different topic from splits. And for sure, splits will not give you abs. Directly. All right, everyone. Is that it? We have like around a minute left because I was late. I was late, so I'm hanging out in case anybody joined the live after I started. Also, once more, we have our stretching competition that starts on Monday, runs through February 3rd. We would love to have you. Also, our flexibility boot camp begins on Monday. We'll love to see you in there. Yay, yay, yay. And I'm excited for the new year. I am. I have a lot of plans. And I think something I learned in 2025 is the importance of learning how to pivot and not getting too caught up with plans that turn in a way that you were not expecting. And in those moments, finding an opportunity to salvage. The art of salvaging, you need that in life. You need that in life, in anything you do. Don't lose hope if something turns out in a way that you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Learn to salvage what you have in front of you, get cooking with it, and then move on to the next thing. If I will leave you with anything for our first live of 2026, it will be that. Okay, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining, for taking the time to join. We appreciate it. Please take care of yourselves. We'll see you next Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. I guess we'll just keep this day. We haven't decided if we're switching the day, but of course, if we do, you'll be the first to know in advance so you can adjust your schedules accordingly. Always a pleasure, family. Thank you again for taking the time, and hopefully I will see you all again on the next one. Take care.